Welcome to the Daily Review. This is Razak, Senior Trading Strategist here at CMTrading. Today is August 29th, 2025, and today is Friday morning. So looking at the highlights of the day, Google pushes to new all-time record highs. But first, looking at today's major economic events. So we have two events at 2:30 South African time from the United States, a Core PCE Price Index number coming out, and also for Canada, we have a gross domestic product number coming out. Now, looking at the market, starting out with the Forex symbol, speaking of, the Canadian dollar continues to slide on a daily chart. We're going to look at that. That's very, very important. And looking at the indices, the Dow Jones and the NASDAQ slightly higher. Looking at commodities, natural gas actually picking up some momentum on the upside. And as we look at the stocks, some of the stocks that were the strongest this week actually sold off, and included Nvidia and included Tesla. But the bank stocks have been super strong and holding on to their gains. And lastly, looking at cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin remains unchanged. So let's take a look at markets and see what we can expect from today's trading. So here you go with the Canadian dollar first. Okay, now the Canadian dollar is a very important asset. It's also very closely linked to oil. Okay, those two actually trade very closely to each other because the Canadian economy is very dependent on the United States, one, and two, on oil as well. So as we look at the Canadian dollar continue to slide this week, and it dipped below its 30-day moving average, that's super important. As if we look at a wider chart, yes, it does have a lot more momentum on the downside if it continues to pick up. Now, this is what I want to highlight. On a weekly chart, it just shows that we're touching the 8-day moving average. So that's super important to understand that and to consider that as we're closing in on that as well. Now, looking for austerity purposes, the Turkish lira, another week, another low, 41 to the dollar. Lost a whole basis point this past week. That's super important. That's picking up momentum on the downside. Now, looking at commodities, let's take a look at gold as it continued to climb this week. Okay, a nice little climb above 34.11. Remember, we're not that far off of our all-time record highs here at 34.50-ish level. Okay, and that is closing in. Now, we do look like we're at the top of the move, okay? But it's already solidified that this is a resistance-ish area. So, with that said, as it closes in around there, you might want to look to short it a little bit at 34.34 and just test it out. And then see, if it is confirming it and is selling off, then get a little bit more aggressive. But wait for that momentum to continue to get a little bit more aggressive in that trade. Now, looking at crude oil, we are pretty much unchanged from week to week, $65 a barrel, very, very cheap price for this time of the year. And if we look at natural gas, a nice little pivot upwards this past week. Okay, we actually rallied 6%. I know it doesn't seem like that on the natural gas, but it rallied 6% this past week as it's making a solidified effort to have a bottom around this area. And we're going to hurricane season, and this is really affected by it tremendously. Now, looking at the U.S. markets, the Dow Jones on its highs, and if we look at the NASDAQ, also close to its highs, but not making higher, but really flirting with its upper levels. Now, if we look at individual stocks, this becomes super interesting, okay? If we look at the Bank of America, it made new all-time record highs again after selling off just a little bit yesterday. And if we look at JP Morgan, on its highs as well, at $300 a share. Unbelievable rally for JP Morgan. Now, looking at Microsoft, it finally got a green candle this past week, a string of them after a major sell-off from its gap up and then the sell, okay, and filling in the gap. And now we're just kind of rebounding at this level. Let's see how far it could rebound. Okay, this is really going to be super interesting to see how this still unfolds. And lastly, let's take a look at Nvidia because it came out with its quarterly earning reports. Now, if you look at intraday, it was very volatile as soon as the market opened. Okay, it traded as high as 182-ish level and as low as 174 and a half. So, I mean, altogether, 8-point range. Pretty decent volatility for the stock. And then, it kind of, made its own way, and it's really unchanged from week to week. I mean, last week we were at this level of 178, between 178 and 180, and we're still there. Okay, so the market is really just taking in the information and not doing much with it because it's all what we call factored in. So nothing really jumping out when it comes to Nvidia this past week. This is Fed Razak. I want to wish you a great trading day and a beautiful weekend. Thank you.
My advice? This is the best time to trade.